Shalom, everyone. My name is Ezra, and I am speaking to you now from my office here in Jerusalem. I am one of the leading legal minds here in this jurisdiction of Jerusalem. A most distinguished lawyer am I, and I have all the answers to any legal question you might have to put to me. I have a great amount of knowledge, and in fact, I believed that there was nothing more left to learn until I met Jesus. I first met Jesus when I was walking towards Jerusalem one day, and I saw him on the streets preaching to the crowds. He was teaching them about the will of God and what we must do to enjoy and experience the joys of heaven. Well, when I heard him teaching, I thought I could teach him a thing or two about the will of God. I have studied God's will and laws in great detail. I know all the laws off by heart and back to front. I can recite any one of them if you wish me to. And so I decided to introduce myself to Jesus. I said, "Hello there, Shalom, Jesus. I am Ezra, one of the greatest lawyers in these parts. And I have a burning legal question for you, Jesus, which I wish to put to you for your due consideration. My question to you is, what must one do to inherit eternal life?" Well, Jesus turned to me and he said, "Ezra, you are a lawyer. I am sure you know all of the laws of..." "Oh, well, of course I know all the laws off by heart, Jesus. I was top of my class. I had only the best grades. I can recite all the laws and in fact put them all into one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself." "Well, you know the laws of God," Jesus said. "Do this and you will live forever." "Ah, yes, but Jesus, I have another question for you. You see, God says, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, the legal explanation for neighbor means the person who lives next to you or near you. So is God saying we should treat the person who lives next to us kindly and well, and that is all? My question to you, Jesus, is, who is my neighbor? Answer me that. And so Jesus turned, and instead of answering my question, he told me this story. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in Jerusalem, and ever since he was a little boy, he had been taught that the people that lived by his side, the people that were his fellow Israelites, were his neighbors. But beyond Jerusalem, there was a land called Samaria. And in Samaria, there lived Samaritans. These Samaritans were sneaky, they were sly, they were strange, and the Israelites had to do everything in their power to steer clear of the Samaritans. Now, one day, this man had to go on a long journey because of work. So he packed up his belongings, he took water with him and provisions for the journey, he put bread and almonds in his basket, and he even took some gold and jewels in case he needed to purchase anything on the way. And off he went, walking along the dusty road in the heat of the day. He walked and he walked towards Jericho, and as he walked, he looked around him cautiously. He didn't want to bump into any of those sneaky, scary Samaritans. But thankfully, he only saw fellow Israelites along the way. He saw a priest that he recognized from the temple, a very respected member of the community, and he greeted him as he walked. And then he saw a Levite. The Levite was the man that used to sing psalms in the temple during the services, and the Levite was singing as he walked. Im Hashem lo yivne bait, Shavam lubona boy, Im Hashem lo yishmorir, Shav shokat shomer, Im Hashem lo yivne bait, Shavam lubona boy, Im Hashem lo yishmorir, Shav shokat shomer, Ine lo Loyanum veloisham, loyanum veloishan, shome Israel. When the man saw the Levite singing along the journey, the man waved and greeted him too. He wished them both well and continued along his way. Well, the day was hot, the road was long, and finally the man started getting hungry and tired. So he stopped and he put down his basket and he sat on a rock to eat. He opened up his food and he began to pick on the almonds. He suddenly heard a sound behind him, but perhaps it was just an animal. Then he heard a sound again. Maybe it was just his tummy rumbling from hunger. No, it was a shuffling. It was a noise and it was coming closer and closer. And then suddenly 3 men appeared out of nowhere and they looked at him and they started coming very, very close. Too close for comfort. Are you Samaritans? The man asked. No, the men said. We're Israelites. Oh, phew. I thought you were those scary Samaritans. Well, please, fellow Israelites, we're neighbours. Come and sit with me. Come and have some of my almonds. Oh, we'd like more than your almonds, sir, the men said. Why don't you give us some of your nice fancy clothes? And oh, what have we got here? Jewels and gold. Leave those. They belong to my father, the man said. Oh, they're daddy's precious things, are they? Oh, we mustn't take daddy's things from you, And then they started to pull at his clothes and tear them off. They took all of his belongings and then they threw the man against the rock and they beat him hard and left him by the roadside for dead. And then they ran off laughing. The poor man was in a heap on the ground. He was covered in blood. His clothes were stained. He was all full of sores and wounds. He was bleeding. He's sure he'd lost some teeth. He was sure his bones were broken. He could hardly move. And he wondered who would come and rescue him now on this lonely road, when suddenly he heard footsteps approaching. He summoned up all his strength and peered out, and through his bleary eyes, he saw a man coming closer. It was the priest. It was the priest that he had seen earlier along the road. It was the priest who was a respected member of the community. Surely he would help him. And he waved at him to get his attention. But the priest walked on the other side of the road. The priest didn't even look at him as he went past. The man was desperate. Why had he been ignored? But no sooner had the priest gone than he heard the sound of singing approaching. Ine ine loyanum loyanum veloishan loyanum veloishan shomer Israel. It was the Levite, the one who sang psalms in the temple at the services, the one that the man had seen earlier in the day. And he summoned up all his strength to call out to the Levite, "Help me, neighbor, please." But the Levite, he picked up a stick, he prodded him, he nudged at him, but he didn't stop to help him. Instead, he walked off as far as he could. He was important, he was well dressed. He was a man who had business. He had things to do and people to see. Caring for this miserable, messy, blood-stained bundle on the road was going to take up too much of his precious time. Besides, he would need new clothes and food. He would need a bed to sleep in. All that cost money. Well, he wasn't going to spare any of his money. Let someone else look after him. And off he went, just as the priest had done before him. Well, the poor man on the road was desperate. He knew he would never, ever survive, when suddenly he heard the clippity-clop of hooves on the road. He turned. He saw a donkey, and sitting on the back of a donkey was a man. He recognized the clothes. It was no ordinary man. It was a Samaritan. A sneaky, sly, strange Samaritan. Oh, the man had hoped the Samaritan hadn't seen him. Just pretend you're dead. Pretend you're dead, he kept saying to himself. The others passed by and didn't stop. He won't pass by either. He won't stop. He won't see me.
and he lay as still as he possibly could. But the horse's hooves stopped, and then the man heard footsteps approaching him. The footsteps came closer and closer and closer. "Don't touch me," the man thought, "don't touch me." But the man knelt down beside him. The Samaritan started to touch him and take hold of his hands and his feet and his head. "Get away from me!" the man cried out with as much strength as he could. "Don't touch me, you sneaky, sly Samaritan! Go away!" But the Samaritan didn't go anywhere. Instead, he pulled bandages out of his bag. He took wine to disinfect the poor man's wounds. He took oil to soothe his aching limbs. And then he hoisted the man onto his shoulders off the dusty road and gently placed him on his donkey. When the man opened his eyes, he was in a warm, soft bed, in a cozy room. He looked, and his hands were covered in bandages. But he felt so much better, and was that the sound of warm, baked bread? What had happened? Where was he? And then it all came back to him. The road, the journey, the thieves that had stolen from him, the priest and the Levite that had completely ignored him, and then the Samaritan on his donkey. There he was. He looked up from his bed and he saw the Samaritan. Through a crack in the door, the Samaritan was talking to the innkeeper, and he was taking money out of his pocket and giving the money to the innkeeper and saying, "Take care of this man. Make sure he heals completely before he gets up from that bed. Look after him, and any more money that you spend on his care, I will repay you on my return." The man felt a warm, strange feeling inside of him. This Samaritan wasn't sly and strange and sneaky. This Samaritan had treated him like a member of his own family, like a friend, like a true neighbor. Well, the man had learnt that day that a Samaritan wasn't the enemy. "Thank you, Samaritan," he said, "for showing me that everyone is my neighbor."
After Jesus had finished telling me this story, he turned to me and he said, "Now, Ezra, tell me which out of the three, the priest, the Levite, or the Samaritan, which of these behaved like a neighbor to the man who had been attacked by the thieves?" I hadn't noticed that I had been crying while listening to the story. Jesus, I believe the one who was a true neighbor was the one who had compassion and pity on the man, the one who served him and was kind, the Samaritan. So now, Ezra, that you have heard this story, you can see that your neighbor is every human being on this earth. It doesn't matter whether they live near you or far away. It doesn't matter where they have come from or who they are. It doesn't matter if they are nice or nasty or whether you like them or not. They are all your neighbor, and God has said, love your neighbor as you love and care and serve yourself. And so, if you imitate the Samaritan, you will have joy in this life and the next. So I always remembered this story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus told me. I try to remind myself of it all the time. And whenever I see someone who acts kindly towards someone else, I call that person a Good Samaritan. So now that you have heard this story today, how could you be a Good Samaritan?